Okay, good afternoon, good evening, everybody. Well, afternoon to some of you, evening to the rest of us. And I'm trying to get my okay button out of the way. There we go. Okay, welcome to another chapter of It's iBug's Life, where each fourth Thursday of the month we discuss some things that everybody can do independently without having to require vision. It could be a variety of topics. But before we get into all of that, as customary, what I'll like to do first is bring back the ladybug to kind of like go over some announcements and then we'll get into introductions. So, Sandia?
All right. Yes. Thank you, George. I'll just give you the highlights because we don't want to take any more time away from our special guest. So this weekend, tomorrow, actually, we have the iBug Night at the Virtual Movies. We'll be watching Inside Man. Inside Man, starring Denzel Washington and Jodie Foster and somebody else that I forgot, but I think you know that person. But anyway, from 2006, so it'll be audio described, starts at 8 p.m. Central. Social time is at 7:15. We have named that tune, jokes, all kinds of craziness, and then after the movie, we'll have a discussion and trivia to follow. Then on Saturday, we have iBug Apple Workshop. And there from 2 to 4 Central Time, we're going to be talking about the latest Apple news, some cool demos from new and old presenters. So come and support them. And that will be on, like I said, on Saturday. And then of course on Monday we'll start all over again. We'll have our iBug Buzz. Anybody that's new, if you've never heard, we do a Monday night call where we talk all about the iPhone peripherals, applications, everything on the Monday night call. All of the events that I just mentioned and more are available on our same Zoom conference line. So if you're here now, you can attend all of them. Just save them in your device. All right, we have a website. Visit ibugtoday.org, ibugtoday.org. There you can register. All of our services and registration and everything is free, so you can't beat the price. So please check that out. That way you'll get regular notifications of upcoming events like this one. And then we are a 501c3 nonprofit organization. We're doing our annual fundraiser, and it's a fun one. It's fun, huh? It's $10 for the opportunity to win $500. $500 can be yours for a donation of $10, or you can do $50 and get 6 tickets. So a little incentive there. And let's see, all the information for payment is all on our website. And the drawing is on May 25th, 2024. That'll be at our 13th anniversary call. So you don't have to be present to win. And if you don't want $500, buy it from somebody else. I'm sure they will appreciate it. Okay, those are our announcements. I'll hand it back to George.
And if you don't want $500, I'll be gladly to be your recipient if you have something to do with it. I mean, I'm just saying. Okay. All right. Thank you, Sandia. And everyone, okay, we're going to jump right into this thing because we have a packed house tonight. But before we get started, I would like to know who's out here. So what I want everybody to do is come off mute, announce your name and the city and state that you are calling from. And if you're first time here, how did you hear about iBud? So who's first?
Terry from Arlington Heights, Illinois.
Hey, Terry, welcome.
Desi from Franklin, Tennessee.
Robert
Hey,
from
Desi.
Chandler, Arizona.
Arizona, welcome.
Hi, this is Shay from Seattle.
Shay from, what you said, Seattle?
Seattle, yep.
Okay.
Ed from Kyle,
Welcome.
Texas.
Ned, I'm sorry.
Michelle from Charleston, South Carolina.
Michelle from South Carolina. There was one other person that started
Deb
coming
from Wichita, Kansas.
from Wichita, Kansas.
Pete, Jacksonville, Florida.
Welcome, Jacksonville.
Judy from Connecticut.
Hey, Judy from Connecticut.
Dan, Southern California.
And from California, we're from the East Coast to the West Coast.
Janice from Maryland.
Back to the East Coast. Hey, Janice.
Rick from
Liz
Florida.
Fort Worth.
I heard Rick and Liz, but I didn't hear
Yep.
where.
Fort Worth.
Fort Worth. And Rick, where are you from?
Florida, Orlando.
Okay. Anybody else? Come off mute.
Roy from Fort Worth,
Name.
Texas.
Fort Worth. Great, great.
Angela, Rochester, Minnesota.
Rochester, Minnesota.
Shaking it up a bit in the middle of the world here.
Have y'all warmed up yet?
And during the day, it's pretty nice.
Okay. Who's the other person?
This is Intisar from Iowa. And I also go by Ini.
Welcome, Iowa. There was one other
Yes.
person who was real low before under you. Okay. Anybody else? Come off mute, say your name, the city and state that you're calling from. We're gonna do this
Gloria
for
from Houston.
Gloria from Houston. Welcome, Houston. I know where Houston's at. Anybody else?
From Chicago.
Who's from Chicago?
Cindy.
Cindy. Cindy, we're gonna kick you out because you swept my Astros today. No, I'm joking. I'm only joking.
Janelle from Houston.
Hey, Janelle.
Hey, George.
Anybody else?
Michael in Texas.
Sonny, I'm gonna let you handle that.
This is Samir from Houston.
Okay. Anybody else? We go like 10 more seconds, 20 more seconds. Anybody else wants to announce themselves? We got a lot of people here. Don't be shy.
Well, we can always come back at the midpoint also. So.
Okay. And we can do that. Okay. Well, we will go ahead and get started. Yeah, there'll be another opportunity for you to introduce yourself and announce yourself. As a matter of fact, if you have questions later on, then you can do it then. So we got an exciting topic tonight. Some of you may have heard or may have read what it's about. And so what I'm going to do, since we have a special guest tonight, I know you guys are all sad because you're not going to hear me talking for the next 2 hours, but it's okay. I'm going to be here talking. But I'm going to let Sandhya, the ladybug, introduce our guest speaker tonight to discuss this month's topic.
All right. Thank you, George. Yes, we love George, but every once in a while we give George a little break. And then this gentleman volunteered, stepped up and said that he would like to share some of his knowledge with iBug. And of course, we're very grateful for that. And this gentleman, many of the people who are on this call that come to our iBug Night at the Virtual Movies, you may know him as the one that gets all the names and dates and titles and connections on our Name That Tune. So there's really he eliminates the competition. There is no more competition. So, but we've gotten to know him over the last couple of months and have really enjoyed it. And I had no idea that he knew all this stuff about money. And if you're wondering who I'm talking about Mr. Daryl Oxner. I didn't even know what his last name was. I just knew him as Daryl, the guy on our iBug call. But we're super glad that he's here. He's so modest. I asked him to give me a little bio about himself, and he's like, I don't usually write bios about myself. And I'm like, well, it's always interesting to see how people, arrive at their journey because we don't always know where it's going or how we're going to get there. And with your permission, Daryl, I'm going to share a little bit because I think it's fascinating.
Sure.
All right. It was a rhetorical question, Daryl. So,
Okay.
no, he's such a good sport and has a great sense of humor. All right. So here we go. After losing his vision in grad school while working on his doctorate in analytical chemistry, Daryl turned. Okay. Hang on. Mr. McCullough, can you mute that?
I'm not a co-host.
Hang on. All right. Sorry about that. Okay. Okay. After losing vision in grad school while working on his doctorate in analytical chemistry, Daryl returned to get an undergrad degree in computer science. His first job after losing his vision was in Washington, D.C. for the U.S. Naval Research Laboratory as a research chemist. When he moved to Tennessee, he was hired to teach computers to those individuals who were 55 and older. And then later, the blind and visually impaired were added to his roster. Well, roster, I guess. Since 2000, he has been a full-time investor and he has spent time increasing his knowledge and ability in this field. He has taught numerous classes of investors, both in person and online, has taught sighted groups as well as visually impaired, and has offered investing guidance on American Council of the Blind, ACB, for the last year. So with that, I will hand it over to Mr. Daryl Oxner. Daryl, are you there? Uh-oh, did I lose him? After all that.
Daryl, you got to hit your unmute. I think he got the unmute. And hit your
How
okay.
about that?
There you are. There you are. All right. Good, good. It's all yours, sir.
Okay. For any of you who am I muted again?
No, you good.
No, we hear you.
Oh, okay. I'm sorry. I thought somebody said I was muted again. For any of you that have been with me on the online calls, you guys know how much I encourage your personal questions, because unlike pure academic fields, investing and all of this financial info really doesn't help if you don't put it to use. So definitely far more important than my presentation is your questions and getting answers that will help you individually in your particular case. It's true that we're all at different ages, stages, and wages. So therefore, some of you might have questions on debt or banking. Other of you might have general questions on investing, whether it be stocks or bonds or funds or ETFs. Others might be self-employed, and you might have questions on SEPs or solo 401s, or maybe your company has a 401 or a 403 or a 457, etc. And then we can talk about all those things. We can talk about diversification. We can talk about taxable accounts and using investments to even help with your taxes. So there's a lot of different things we can cover. If you need me to repeat anything, just speak up and say, hey, repeat that. I still don't understand your accent. I understand. That can happen. So basically, I want everybody to get as much out of the call as possible. And let's just try to enjoy it. Sometimes I know this topic can seem intimidating to some people, but I want to break down that barrier. It is really not hard. Unfortunately, some people in the industry want to make it appear hard, and that might be simply to justify their jobs. But let's do away with that. I want to level the playing field and give you as much knowledge as you need. So I've been told if anyone has questions, don't raise your hand, just speak up and stop me. And if I don't stop, then you can start doing a song and dance and get my attention somehow. So let's see. To start off with, let's start at the very basic, at the very beginning. How do we address such a diversified topic as all of this? I mean, budgeting and retirement and investment accounts. Well, we start with a very simple concept of budgeting. Now, some people don't like the word budget, so therefore, for those people, we can call that cash flow. And all that really needs to do is you need to manage what is coming in, the money that comes in, whether it be from income, wages, dividends, royalty checks, etc., versus what goes out, whether that be bills or mortgages or rent payment, etc. Also, if you can manage the income and the outgo together, you can also make an item to where you can start saving or investing on a routine, regular basis. And especially at the beginning, that is very beneficial, extremely beneficial. I know a lot of people that I've come into contact with in the last 30 years have said, well, after I retire, I need to get with you so I can plan my retirement. Well, unfortunately, the best time to get with somebody like me is long before retirement. In fact, the earlier the better. It's sort of like planting a tree. You don't plant a tree and want it to be 100 feet tall. You have to plant it and it grows over time. Many of you who have been around me online know that I will sometimes compare investing to that of a snowball. Basically, you have to first get the snowball working, get the snow together to make a small snowball. But once you start it rolling down the hill, it gets larger and larger and larger. And over time, and if you think about it, the longer it rolls down the hill, the bigger it becomes. So the question is, do you want a snowball that's only a foot big, or would you like a snowball that's as big as a mountain? All of that is simply a factor of time and wise choices. So I encourage you, if you have not started, please start today. Start as soon as you can. And it doesn't matter how small you start. The main part is to get started. Okay, So what I'm going to do, okay, budgeting and saving. Okay, so budgeting, as I said, basically covers the money coming in with the money going out. If you don't like budgeting, you can call it cash flow. Now, what is the difference between saving and investing? Does anyone have a clue or a guess what the difference is? Speak up if you have a guess, want to guess. Anyone? Okay. Basically, saving is something that is done usually with a low return instrument. It could be things like savings accounts. It could be CDs. It could be money markets. Those things are usually void of market risk, and I'll get into market risk when we talk about equities, but those things usually have a fixed rate, whether it be a fixed rate for a month or a year or 10 years, but they don't have the volatility or the up and down movement of investments. Now, that's what saving is. Okay, if it doesn't have the market risk, does savings have any other risk? Is there any risk, or can we say that saving is completely risk-free? Anyone want to take a guess?
I would guess no.
Okay.
And the reason would be inflation.
Inflation, exactly. The biggest risk to simple savings is inflation. It is a guaranteed loss. Okay, well, if that's the case, if even savings has a risk, and so the question is, okay, let's say if we want to, we have a sum of money, and what we want to do is we want to decrease risk. What would be a good way to do that? Would that be to put it all in, say, stocks? Or would it be good to put all in savings? Or would it be good to diversify the risk by putting some in stocks, some in bonds, and some in cash?
Diversify.
Diversify.
Yes.
Diversify.
Exactly. Wow, you guys are already on track. Okay, basically, what you're doing is when you're diversifying your assets, you're diversifying across those different asset classes. And by diversifying, you are actually lowering your overall risk for your portfolio. Okay, and portfolio, by the way, is just a fancy name. That simply means your investments and your savings that you personally own. So that's all that means.
Hey, Daryl.
Yes.
This is Sri. So when you say inflation and you diversify, is there a protection for inflation for diversify, or are you still at the same risk of that inflation?
I think you said SPY, but so I heard you correctly. Ask that question again.
Sure. My question is, we talked about the risk of inflation when you're in savings, but when you diversify your account, are you protected by that inflation, or are you impacted with the same rate?
Well, inflation comes across at the same rate for all asset classes. Okay, so yes, equities do experience inflation. Okay, the benefit of equities or stocks, that's interchangeable, equities or stocks, basically because they in longer periods grow faster than inflation, which savings instruments usually do not. That's why they usually aren't bothered too much by inflation. Does that answer what you were asking?
Kind of. The reason I'm asking is, I was reading some articles during, when the inflation rates were very high, people were saying to take your money out of the market. So is that why they're saying because does it hurt more because the inflation went up and you were in the market?
Oh, I see what you're saying. Yes. This introduces a lot of other things. When you think about it, equities or stocks, remember, they counteract inflation the best out of everything. So when people are saying, oh, inflation is high, take your money out of stocks. Okay, well, then your first question should be, okay, where do I put it? Oh, put it in cash. Okay, now think about it. So you're going to take your money out of something that is the best way to fight inflation. You're going to put it in something that inflation erodes the fastest, and you're going to hope that you're going to do better. Do you see a problem with that?
Yeah, I just see a lot of headache when this stuff is going on.
Yeah, not only that, think about the simple diversification. Let's say if your portfolio had a certain percentage in equities and bonds and cash, what they're basically telling you to do is, decrease your diversification, get rid of one asset class completely, and double up on another asset class, which just happens to be the one that inflation erodes the fastest. So, yes, what that is commonly called is timing the market. There are lots of beginners, as beginner investors, non-investors. That is a knee-jerk panic reaction. Often the best thing to do is when people tell you to do something like that, I would recommend whatever they say. Probably if you do the opposite, you will do better than what they will recommend. There is a line in investing, and that is time in the market as opposed to timing the market. So anytime somebody tells you to pull in or pull out or put in simply based on external conditions, that is very inexperienced advice, very bad, and please do not follow that. That will only hurt you in the end. But yes, I have seen many people do it, and I have seen millions of dollars lost by people doing that. Good question, by the way. Okay. And by the way, if anybody has questions, you do not have to focus on whatever I'm talking about at the moment. If you want to jump to anything that your head or heart wants to ask, please do. I am used to that completely. Okay, credit and debt. Let's briefly touch on credit and debt. Basically, debt is question?
Yes. Can you
Go
hear
ahead.
me?
Yes.
Yes. Can you please, before you go to credit and debts, talk a little bit, because the person asked about investments, so you jump to that. I really would love to hear you talk a little bit about the regular saving and money market and stuff. What is the best saving account we should, because I hear there's different kind of saving accounts we should use, things like that before we area about the diversity. Yeah.
Oh, okay. Now, you might want to guide my answer more specifically, but I can tell you that general money markets right now are paying around 5%. I know two of them. One, for instance, is above 5%, and one is slightly under 5%. And those are regular money market accounts. If your savings account or whatever you have at a bank or wherever you have it, if that's not paying around or above 5%, then you probably could do better. Okay.
This
Did
is
you go ahead?
Can I follow up with that question?
Sure.
Do you
Absolutely. I
recommend
love questions.
a bank or a credit union if you had a choice? Is the credit union typically gives a better rate, or is it now not like that?
In general, credit unions generally pay a little bit higher than banks. Personally, for the last 14 years, I don't use local banks or credit unions because I found a much better option. For instance, my checking account right now, and it's with a company called Fidelity. They also are one company that manages investments for me. One of the companies I use, their checking account pays, I think it's like 2.7 at the moment. And you say, well, is there any minimums? There are zero minimums. There are zero fees. Checks are free. Not that anyone uses checks, but pretend if you did use checks, checks are free. Check writing is free. Some banks will charge if you use other people's ATMs. Fidelity will actually reimburse if that other bank that you use their ATM, they will reimburse your account. So yes, in general, though, credit unions generally pay a little higher, but I don't use either one. And I had a local bank up until 2010, and I switched, and I'm glad I did. I switched because back in those days, banks, especially larger banks, were increasing their fees for anything. If you walked in the door, it seemed like they increased their fees. And of course, you say, well, what if I go to a small bank? Well, the problem is big banks buy up smaller banks. And so there's not many small banks left. But if you have a small bank or a small credit union and it has very good, say, rates, then that's fine. You can stick with that. I use, like I said, online cash management, which is the same thing as a checking account with Fidelity. And I set up what is called overdraft protection. That is also a free service with Fidelity. That's what I personally do. So yeah, either way though, that'll work. Did I answer the question on money market or savings accounts that you had asked originally? I'm not sure if I answered where you were trying to get me to go, though. Did I answer that correctly or accurately? Okay.
Was that towards me, or was that towards someone else?
This is George. You were talking about money markets paying 5%, or once you go for those payouts, does that happen quarterly, happen monthly? What's the frequency of
Yes, money
pay?
market funds pay monthly, and the yield is the APR. That's the annual percentage rate. And yes, basically, that is not a guarantee such as a CD. And I should probably address those too. But a money market, for instance, let's say Vanguard's money market, I also use them. Vanguard's money market, last time I looked, a week or so back, I think it was paying like 5.3. That is simply the measure of the APR at that time. If and when the Fed, meaning the Federal Reserve, if they ever start lowering interest rates, that rate will lower. But large banks right now, and you know the ones that everybody knows by names, big billion-dollar banks, I have seen them pay interest rates currently of 0.01% or zero. And you say, well, how can they get away with that? Basically, once people open up an account at a bank, the banks know that that money is often what is called sticky, and it's very hard for people to take their business and leave them. Banks know that, and they use that against their customers. Okay. Yes.
Go ahead,
Just
Sandia.
giving a time check at 7:37.
Okay.
Okay. Now, before you move on, I know you indicated you want everybody to ask about anything, but just to save on confusion, because some of us are very beginners, let me just ask, if anybody have any other questions regarding the current type of money markets or things like that.
Money markets FDIC insured?
Money market savings accounts at banks are. Money market funds at brokerage companies, technically they are not, but what they invest in are things like insured CDs and commercial paper. So you say, well, technically, is a money market account FDIC insured? Technically, it is not, but the majority of things that are in a money market are. Okay. Furthermore, you say, well, has any money market ever, and I'm going to throw out a term here, broke the buck? That means it drops less than $1 face value. Yes, there was one. It was not a retail money market. It was actually a commercial money market, and it dropped 3 cents back in 2008, and everybody panicked. But retail money markets, the insides, the guts of it, so to speak, mostly are insured. The instrument itself is not insured. And like I say, other than that one commercial money market back in 2008, and Congress actually changed the laws because of that happening. But yes, for a while, everybody was up in arms and everybody was panicking. That was during the housing bubble and all of that at the end of that. And that's when that happened. But if you have a money market at companies such as Vanguard or Fidelity, I will pretty much guarantee that it will never break the buck. It'll stay at $1 face value, and once a month, you will basically get interest. And now that still does not really beat inflation, It's over inflation a little bit now, but it does not do as good as equities or bonds in over time. Since I'm talking about fixed rate equivalents, let's briefly touch on CDs, both bank CDs and brokered CDs. Bank CDs are basically where you can go to individual banks or credit unions and you can buy a CD for a fixed duration and a fixed term. Was there background? Oh, I thought there was a question. Sorry.
No, go ahead.
Anyway, so that works. And as long as you don't exceed $250,000 at that institution in your account, then you're insured. That is with a bank or a credit union. Now, brokerage companies such as Fidelity or Vanguard, they will offer what are called brokered CDs. Now, basically, these are CDs that originate with those same banks. So, yes, they are all FDIC insured, but the banks will go to the brokerage companies and see they're wanting basically money. So they will give what is called a jumbo CD, and they'll let the brokerage company divvy that up, usually by increments of $1,000 to their customers. So let's say JP Morgan or Wells Fargo goes to Fidelity or Vanguard and said, well, here's a $1 billion, I'm just throwing out a number, a $1 billion CD. Can you break that up into increments of $1,000 to your customers? And yes, they do that. And those things are available through brokerage companies. They work very much like bank CDs, except there are some advantages. One, you don't have to go to numerous bank account or different banks to set up different CDs. And let's say if you have $1 million instead of the 250 limit, because it's all in one account, you can put 250,000 per CD at different banks, but it's still all in one brokerage account. So therefore, you're still FDIC insured, okay, even though you have more than 250, and it makes it very convenient. And not that I recommend doing so, but because it's a brokered CD, you are allowed to sell that to other investors on what is called the secondary market. I won't get into that, but basically selling is fairly easy if you wish.
All right, hold
Question?
on. Before you get there, this is George.
Okay, George.
Hold that thought. I don't want you to lose that thought. But what would you say is the minimum amount someone could put into a CD, and actually it can be kind of lucrative to receive? I guess that depends on what the yield is. Is that correct?
Current yields range from about 5.5 on down.
Mm-hmm.
So just as an example, I just happened to be on the Fidelity site a few hours ago. A 1 year was 5.4, but a 1 month and 3 month, and they had numerous ones that were 5.35, and I didn't even get past that. They had
Okay.
1 year, and then they had about 10 or more ones that were 1 month and 3 month, and all of those paid 5.35. As far as what is lucrative, that's a hard question. I don't think CDs or money markets are necessarily lucrative. I can do far better in equities. But I guess you're going to have to figure out what you think is lucrative. I can answer the question as far as what is the minimum. Usually, to get those yields, you need a minimum of $1,000.
Okay. And just to
Go
kind
ahead.
of simplify it, in case there's somebody on you who is a very beginner,
Okay.
when you say the yield is like you said, 5.5%, somebody
Right.
puts in 1,000, after that year, you will take that 5.5 and multiply it to the 1,000. That way you will know how much your CD has grown to. Is that correct?
Yes. Basically that would be your interest. It's still in two parts. You have the
Okay.
original principal and then you have the interest.
Gotcha.
Yeah.
This,
Now, go ahead.
sorry. I mean, you're going to probably get to this, but like, what if you don't have like hundreds of thousands of dollars? So maybe you can talk about that afterwards about what, we should be trying to save and how to, bring down our debt and all that. You probably, you may already have that on your
No,
list.
that's a good thing. The first thing that everyone should try to do is set up what is called an emergency fund. What that means is money in a very accessible tool, such as a money market or even a savings account or something that you use for emergencies. Now, emergencies is not, hey, let's go out to eat every week. That is not an emergency. Emergency is, let's say, if you are working a job and you lose your job, then to pay your bills, that is probably an emergency. If you, well, I won't say many of you drive, but if any of you own a car or own a house or whatever, and your AC or your heat or something breaks, that is probably an emergency. If your roof develops a leak, that is an emergency. So an emergency fund is very important to have. I would recommend at the very minimum, as in step number 1, even before you start paying off debt, let's say if you have debt, build at least a beginner emergency fund. And a lot of people will say, well, how much does an emergency fund need to be? I would say a beginner emergency fund probably could be a minimum. I would say maybe $500 to $1,000, even before you pay off debt. Because the problem is, if you don't have an emergency fund, usually bad things happen at the wrong time. And if you don't have an emergency fund, then the problem is, how do you pay for those things? Well, then you end up making bad choices, such as, well, I'm going to put it on credit card, or I'm going to get a loan. And then you're paying not only to fix that problem, but you're paying interest on top of that. So definitely have a beginner or a small emergency fund. Let's say $500 to $1,000 if you're an individual, maybe a little bit more if you're married, and even more, let's say, if you have a family.
So Daryl,
yes.
I'm kind of scratching my head here because the debt interest rates are relatively high, aren't they? They're usually well above 10%. Typically, like I'm guessing
Yeah,
credit
if you're
card is
talking
typically
about like credit
10%.
card.
Typically, credit card, or if you
Right.
take some of the, so you're saying it's better to increase that debt and instead of using that money that you put aside for savings?
I'm not saying increase the debt, because that goes back to budgeting, inflow versus outflow. But what I'm saying is, before you even start paying off your credit card, obviously you'll want to pay the minimum monthly, but you need a basic, now not a fully funded emergency fund, but at least some money. Because here's the problem. Let's pretend if you don't have any emergency fund, okay, I have zero money for emergencies. As soon as an emergency will happen, it always does to people that are not prepared. So if you're not prepared and you have zero money for emergencies, you can pretty much plan on an emergency will happen to you. So that's why I'm saying have a basic and not a huge, not a fully funded emergency fund, but yes, have at least $500 to $1,000, especially if you're working. Now, you might be at the low end of that. Let's say if you have a guaranteed pension or a guaranteed annuity payment or whatever, something like that that's guaranteed, then you might be at the low end, especially if you're an individual. Now, like I say, if you're married, if you have kids, you'll need to bump that up. And that is not a fully funded emergency fund. But yes, that is step one. Step two.
This is Ned.
Go ahead, Ned.
Yes, you're using the phrase fully funded emergency fund. How do you define fully funded?
Okay, fully funded would be usually 6 to 12 months of your bills. But that's not until after you get those high interest payments out of the way. So yes, step one would simply be to have a little bit of an emergency fund, but you don't go back to fund your full emergency fund until step three. Step two is when you clear out, if you have debt, which means granted, sometimes it's because something bad happened in your life. I realize that. I'm not discussing that, but many people live on credit card debt simply because they are spending more than they make. They are living beyond their means. And that is a very common problem in America, that everybody wants to buy now and pay for it later. Unfortunately, we are paying interest on top of the original item.
George.
Go ahead.
I heard on a program one time, because it's probably easier for somebody to say give a certain dollar amount, let there be your emergency fund. But one program I heard, it says kind of add up all of your monthly expenses, your regular monthly expenses, like your rent, your utilities, your mortgage, stuff that
right.
You have to pay for, and set a goal that if you have enough saved up that you can cover those expenses for like 3 or even 6 months.
Right.
So that way, if something happens as an emergency, you're good for at least 3 to 6 months or whatever you have built up. So you can set a goal for whatever your total expenses are and try to multiply that by a certain amount of months. And that way, you'll be good. It would, it'll be an emergency, but at least you won't be panicking that you do anything.
Yes. You're exactly right. And if I did not say that clearly, yes, basically that would be your full emergency fund. But what I'm saying is, even before you start that, see, I'm saying start the emergency fund, have a partial, let's call it a partial emergency fund. And then after you have a partial emergency fund, then knock out, especially if you have credit card debt, which, as was pointed out earlier, the interest rates are very high and that works against you. So knock those out next and then go back to fully funding that emergency fund.
This is
So-
Chance.
Go ahead.
Oh no, somebody a tree.
No, go ahead, Jess. I'll wait.
No, because I'm going to
Hey, I
ask on a
love
different
questions. Go
subject.
ahead,
I'm going to ask
anybody.
on a different subject. So
Hey,
if
my
you
rule
wanted
is
to-
ladies first. So go ahead. ladies.
Well, I wanted to get this in so that he can address it when
Sure.
he finishes this subject. But I know it would depend on the stock, but what is the current or average return on equities now? You said CDs.
Are you talking about long term or are you talking about the last month?
Well, I don't know how many of us have a whole lot of time left. You gotta.
Okay,
maybe
basically, what I
for
will
like
do.
a 10-year investment, a 10 or 15-year
Okay,
investment.
I can make it simple, and because see that answer has about 50 different answers. In general, and this is jumping way ahead into equities, but in general, the S&P 500 historically has returned anywhere from say 9 to 10% counting dividends.
Right, and that's
now
10%.
That's the S&P 500 is another name for large cap domestics. If you say, oh, well, can I do better than that? Well, yes, historically you can by adding small caps. Now, there's a trade-off. The small caps historically do a little bit better if you hold them for longer periods, but the volatility increases. It's kind of like the dog and the dog's tail. The small caps are kind of like the dog's tail. It's going to wag all over. But when you add large cap plus small cap, you actually do better, especially over time, than just large cap. But you say, well, do I end there? No, you actually want to include international equities and bonds and some cash to a diversified portfolio.
Diversified portfolio.
Yeah. Does that answer the question?
Didn't mean to take you off topic.
No. Hey, I love questions. Take me wherever you guys want me, because that's better than a presentation. Was there another question?
Yeah, this is straight. You mentioned about this emergency fund. Is that a regular savings account, or are we investing this emergency fund?
No. Remember, investments are equities and bonds, and because they can go up and down, for instance, let's pretend I wanted an emergency fund at $1,000, and let's say tomorrow I have an emergency. Well, if it were in equities, whoops, that $1,000 is now $800. So no, I would definitely want that in a savings vehicle, such as a money market account, a savings account. And you say, well, yeah, but that doesn't beat inflation. I know that, but this is for your emergencies. This is not necessarily to gain millions of dollars.
This is George.
Go ahead, George.
I would also say that you want to have it in an area where you can get to it quickly. You put it in an investment account, sometimes you have to wait like hours or even a couple of days before you get those funds. If you have it in a place you want an emergency, like you have an emergency tonight, you want to be able to access that tonight. So have it in, like he indicated, like a savings, somewhere where you can access those funds quickly if you need to, if a real emergency takes place.
Yes. You do not want it in any kind of investment, even though investments historically do better. Sorry, that was my alarm going off. You basically want it to, be in that safe savings account type vehicle, whether it be money market or savings account, something like that. That is your emergency funds. Now, if your portfolio gets big enough, okay, and you say, well, I have an allocation and I don't really need an emergency fund. Well, if you have hundreds of thousands devoted to your cash allocation or cash equivalents, yes, I will give you a pass. You don't need to worry about it then. But we are talking about beginner investors here. So this is really for people who are starting out. Once you have a developed portfolio and you have many stocks, many bonds, many different cash equivalents, then you're playing by different rules. So this is really for beginners. Go ahead.
This Rosetta.
Rosetta.
Yes, I came in late, so you may have already addressed this question. I was wondering, when you say it's FDIC insured, does that mean dollar for dollar or?
Yeah, okay, for instance, let me give an example. Let's say if you have a CD either at a bank or you have a brokered CD, which really originates from a bank, but you bought it through your brokerage company. Let's pretend that bank folded. Okay, they went out of business. Let's say 3 months after you bought the CD. What the FDIC insurance does is they will guarantee not only will you get your principal back, but you get the interest up to the point where they folded. Now, after they fold, your interest is not guaranteed, and more than likely, you're not going to get that. Let's say if you bought I'll just go to extremes. Let's say you bought a 30-year CD and the bank folded after 3 months. Do not count on the next 29 plus years of interest being given over by the government. That's not going to happen, but you will get your principal back and you will get the interest for those first 3 months.
Okay.
Does that help?
Vincent.
I'm sorry?
No, I had a follow-up on that.
Sure.
My name is Vincent.
Vincent?
Yes. Now, is there a limit on that amount?
Yes. For FDIC insurance, it is $250,000 per person per account. And that's why if you go with a brokerage company and buy, say, brokered CDs, then by diversifying even among banks, you can have, let's say, $1 million and yet have 4 different CDs all paying the same rate, but technically they originated with 4 different banks somewhere in the US, and it doesn't matter where, because your account is all in one place. And so when those 4 CDs mature, not only will your principal come back to what is called your core, but the interest will as well. Does that help? 250,000 though is the FDIC insurance limit.
Rosetta again. Okay, so
Rosetta.
Hi. So this FDIC covers savings accounts, checking accounts also. And was FDIC available when the Great Depression happened back in the 30s?
The Fed, historically, technically, I believe the Fed started, I want to say it was like 2009, but a lot of these rules did not come until after all of that happened. The main point is it does exist now, and that is the current limit. Before they had bumped it up to 250, I think it was at 100,000 per person per account. Now it is 250. But again, keep in mind that is for insurance. And remember, if you put the bulk of your savings or anything else in these type instruments, you will generally underperform inflation. And if you are underperforming inflation, you are simply growing poor slowly. So that is why you need to diversify, not only in savings accounts and CDs and stuff like that, which we're discussing, but also in equities and bonds, which we'll get into later.
George,
Okay.
Rosetta, to answer your historical question, I think FDIC was established by FDR in 1933.
Yeah. Oh, thanks. So, if your money is stolen from a bank or your bank account is hacked or anything like that, does FDIC cover that as well?
If it is stolen, let's say if it is in the bank's possession and the bank is robbed, yes, you are protected. If, however, you had, it gets into gray area. If you are, say, logging into your bank and let's say I come along and I steal your password, or if you grant me access and I steal your money, that is not insured. So the bank will basically decide, was it their fault or your fault? If it is clearly their fault, if they're in possession of your money when it is, if they lost it, it's usually a fairly cut and clear case. Do be careful who you give joint access to on, say, your savings accounts or investment accounts. If you simply, whether it be a friend or a family member, or say even if you're living with somebody, if you're not married to that person, that means a contract. Marriage is a contract, by the way. If you do not have a contract with that person and they take your money and walk out the door, it is not insured and that money is pretty much gone. Okay.
Thank
Clear,
you.
everybody?
Thank you.
Okay. Were there any other questions before I figure out what the next subject was? Let's see. Okay. Why do we create an emergency fund? Why do we pay off our credit card bills? Why do we do all that stuff? Because we're trying to get to the point where we can fund either retirement or investment accounts. And by the way, guys, I hate calling it retirement. I'm not old enough to retire, and yet people say, "Oh, are you retired?" Well, I guess I am, but I retired back at 30. Now, is that retirement? So I don't really like the name. Investment accounts are what I prefer to call it, and that gives you flexibility. That gives you choices as far as, let's say, if you have a job, and let's say you don't like that job. Well, if you have investments, you can choose to work a different job. You don't have to go to a job you don't like. And if you so choose, you don't have to work any of those jobs. You can simply live off your investments and dividends. Okay. And yes, it is possible. Okay. So that is why we create an emergency fund. That is why we pay off our debts and bills. We're trying to get to the point where we create investments. Okay. Now in banking, I touched on this a little bit earlier, but I'll do it again simply because it's in my notes. Variable versus fixed rate savings accounts. A fixed rate, and a good example on that is, for instance, most CDs, whether they be bank CDs or brokered CDs. Again, brokered CDs are really bank CDs just under a different name. They're sold by brokerage companies, but they originate with the banks. Whereas variable accounts, okay, those are savings accounts, money market accounts, checking accounts. If your checking account pays you an interest rate, those are all variable, and those are heavily influenced by whatever the Federal Reserve sets the interest rate currently at. So that's basically the difference between a variable and a fixed rate bank product.
So Daryl,
Uh-huh.
I have a few CDs,
Okay.
and I just let it mature, and I guess after it matures, they throw it back into a CD. Is that correct? And also, when that happens, do I get the same rate as I started off, or is it going to be whatever that rate is at that day that it matured and rolled over again?
Okay. Is this with a bank or brokerage?
It's with the bank.
Okay. Usually banks will, let's say, start you with a CD, and whatever the rate is at that time, let's just pretend for sake of argument, let's say you bought a 1-year CD. At the end of that year, if you have it set for auto enroll with a bank, they will basically take whatever they are paying for a 1-year CD, and that's what you're stuck with. Now, can it be higher? Can it be lower? Can it be anything other than what you started with? Absolutely, and it probably is. Now, related to that, here is another advantage of brokered CDs. Now, pretend you have a brokerage account, and let's say there's 200 different banks offering CDs with this brokerage company. Okay. And let's pretend you have a 1-month CD. Okay. Now, let's say a person started a month ago and the current rate was 5.3%. After 30 days, 1 month, that's if you do not have auto enroll turned on, both the principal and the interest get deposited in your core account. Core account is just another name for a money market account. Okay. What if you have auto enroll turned on? Then, now the interest does get deposited in your core, your money market, but the principal, basically the computer will search through their inventory. It will find the highest yielding 1-month CD and automatically sign you up for that. And so, just as an example, say if you have an auto roll 1-month CD and it's maturing in the next few days, the current rate for a 1 month over at Fidelity is 5.35. Okay. Over at Vanguard, it's actually a little bit higher. I didn't look it up, but generally it is. And that's if you have auto enroll turned on. Does that make sense, both for brokered and bank CDs?
Yeah, and then one other follow-up question with that, is there a different penalty between a bank and a broker when you take money out before it matures?
They work a little bit different. Banks will usually have, depending on the duration of the CD, they'll usually say, well, if you withdraw early, it's a 3-month or whatever penalty. A brokerage, on the other hand, it's basic. They don't have like a month penalty like that. You simply sell it on the secondary market, and every day it will give you the updated price for what you would sell it for, if that makes any sense. For instance, you buy it at what is called 100. Now that's the face value, even though it's $1,000. So they would say, okay, you're buying at par. That's 100%. If it goes down to say 99, it's basically 99%. So, let's say 3 months and 6 days after you buy it, you decide to sell it. You can look on your account and you say, okay, if I sell this CD, just multiply the 99% times whatever you bought in the principal, and that's what you'll get on the secondary market. Now, with brokered CDs, literally there are anything ranging 1 month, 2 month, 3 month, every single month, generally up to about a year and a half or more. And then they start going by years. But I would generally discourage buying a long-term CD if you were unsure. Break it up into multiple CDs. If you're unsure if you're going to need, say, money in 6 months, but you really want a 1 year, break it into 2. Buy some for a 6 month and one for a year. Which also brings up another topic, which is called CD laddering. You can do this, by the way, also with bonds, especially treasury bonds. Fidelity is one brokerage company that makes this very simple. Vanguard, unfortunately, does not. You can do it manually, but Fidelity does it automated. And what that means is, let's pretend you want to buy a 5-year CD ladder. Okay. Now, what they do is they basically pick, let's call it rungs on a ladder. They'll take your 5,000 and they'll divide it up into 5 $1,000 increments, and they will do a 1 year, a 2 year, a 3 year, a 4 year, a 5 year. Okay. Now, at the end of 1 year, if you don't cash it in or give them instructions, what it does is automatically that 1 year CD matures and is replaced with a 5-year CD. And the same for the 2, the 3, the 4. And once you get to 5 years, then basically you have 5 CDs. Each one is 5 years long, and each one at that time had the highest rate. Now they have both a 5-year and a 2-year ladder, but manually you can set up a ladder on your own. You can do it at a brokerage company. You can do it at banks. It's a little bit harder at banks, but yeah, you can do it on your own. A 2-year ladder is basically 4 CDs, 6 month, 12 month, 18 month, and 24 month. And similar to the 5-year, at the end of 6 months, the 6-month CD matures, it's replaced with a 2-year. At 12 months, the 1-year CD matures, it's replaced with a 2-year. You say, well, what happens if I need, money when the 3rd CD matures? They'll send you an email, or you can call them and say, hey, cancel the auto enroll for that 1 CD, and no problem, it goes to your core. And that's it. Okay. Question before I go on?
Hey, Darryl. All right, this is George. Just want to know, we got like about 40 minutes left. I was wondering, I don't know if you have prepared in your outline, are you going to talk about stocks, or how do you monitor,
Oh, yes. I've got enough to fill up about 20 years worth. Yes. I'm going at a slow speed probably, but yes, I can get into stocks and bonds and funds and ETFs, etc. There is a lot more material.
Well, I'll tell you what, here, quickly, before you go to stocks, because I know we probably have a few people online and maybe on fixed incomes, and they're probably wondering, as we making all these investments, what's the best way we can invest to grow our equity, but not have the government find out about it so we lose that fixed income that comes in every month? If you know what I mean.
Okay. I did have that as one of my topics. I was going to cover that in specialized accounts, but that is called an ABLE account.
Yeah, talk about that.
Okay, that stands if for anybody who wants to be fun at parties. That ABLE stands for Achieving a Better Life Experience. And most people say, do what? Just call it an ABLE account. All the states have an ABLE account. Some states you choose, such as do I want growth? Do I want moderate growth, conservative growth, etc.? Other states, you choose your allocation, and that means you get to pick how much is in domestic equity, how much is international equity, how much is in bonds, etc. You are allowed to put in, or actually, you're allowed to have up to $100,000 before your state benefits are suspended. Federal benefits are not affected at all. So if you're only receiving federal benefits, then an ABLE account is probably not the best. But if you are receiving state benefits, such as SSI, that is state, then if you're wanting to protect your money, do not put it under your mattress, put it in an ABLE account. Okay, that will allow far better growth than under your mattress. As I said, all 50 states have it. Some states are better than others. I am familiar with some of the states. I am not familiar with all of the states. Feel free to ask about those. If you look at your state's ABLE account, most of them have a toll-free number. The main thing is you're allowed to have up to 100,000. As far as funding it, you're allowed to fund it up to, I think it was about 350,000. You are only allowed to have one ABLE account. So if you have it in whatever state, say Tennessee, you cannot have one also in Utah at the same time. So one account per person. But if you do not have state benefits, do not open an ABLE account.
This is true.
Okay.
Is there an age limit for that?
Age limit? No, there is not an age limit. There is a limit. You and one of you guys can hopefully help me. I think you had to have the disability before you were, I think it's 26. I think they're going to bump that up to 40 in soon. But yes, if you had your disability before age 26, or it might have been 23, it's somewhere in the 20s. If you got your disability, say in your 30s, then in a year or two, and I would have to look that up to be sure, but the Congress is changing the rules and they're bumping that up to age 40. So as long as you had your disability before age 40, then you can have an ABLE account. And basically, an ABLE account is basically a savings account, but unlike the old days where, I can only have $2,000 before I lose my SSI, Now you can have up to $100,000 and still not lose your SSI. Okay. Any questions on clarification or anything?
This is Jake. I have a couple of questions.
Sure.
I looked at my state's able account and it's like I have to bank at their specific bank, it sounds like, and I'm allowed $18,000 a year for contribution, but it says that like if I die that I have to pay the money back after my death.
Yeah, basically there are rules. Now the 18,000, by the way, that is an annual and it's they say indexed to inflation. So next year that will go up. But yes, technically for this year, you or somebody on your behalf can contribute 18,000. And if it's in that account and if you are receiving state benefits and stuff, yes, there are rules around that, but that is the trade-off for getting state benefits as well. Like I say, if you're not getting state benefits, I would not recommend opening an ABLE account because there are better and cheaper options elsewhere.
Okay, because I thought about doing like a trust.
Okay, like a special needs trust?
Yeah, and they say that they kind of complement each other.
They can. If you have, let's say, well into the hundreds of thousands, millions, or above, I have structured trust, and I don't want to get it too far into the weeds for this call, but basically the special needs trust funded the ABLE account, and then the individual withdrew from the ABLE account because the ABLE account generally allows easier withdrawals and much less rigorous. To set up a special needs, one, you're going to have a lawyer involved. And two, as with any trust, you have more tax rules and more of that, more justification, more paperwork. So yes, the trust funded the ABLE and the ABLE funded the individual. But yes, I have structured that before.
Okay. And do you know, like, can you change like Social Security benefits to where it can go into a trust or does it have to go to the individual?
Yeah. I believe it can, because I know that benefits actually can go to a different individual. At least they used to. Now, remember, when you set up a trust is not, okay, let's say I have a trust. That doesn't mean I have to, say, bank or invest at one specific company. Let's say if I have accounts at Vanguard and Fidelity, I can have both or all of those accounts under one trust. So yes, I mean, your actual money payment is going to the account, and it just happens to be within the trust. But I would need to look that up to make sure about that, because that is a legal issue. And either I or ask your nearest lawyer who is familiar with trust rules.
Yeah, because I thought about getting in the stock market and it was before the ABLE account that I knew about it. So I thought about contacting a lawyer.
Right.
But then I found out about the ABLE account. But like I have my bank that they work with is 5-3 Fifth Third Bank. But they charge you like a $52 a year fee to do it.
Right. And if you do not like your state's ABLE account, I encourage you to look at other states. I am the most familiar with Tennessee. I do not have an ABLE account, But in Tennessee, they basically use Vanguard funds and you get to choose your allocation. In states such as California or Florida, you don't choose your allocation, but you choose basically whether you want growth or conservative growth, etc. And based on that, they choose your allocation. Then there are other states, which I won't mention because I didn't personally do the research, but I have been told by other individuals that their options were extremely limited. It would be like a savings account and one generic fund of sorts. And so if your state is like that, then yes, definitely look at other states. Many states, including Tennessee, do allow non-residents, meaning people outside Tennessee, to open an account. And all of the money basically is hooked up between your ABLE account and your checking or savings. So money flows easily. It wouldn't matter if it's in one state or another.
Yeah, like in Michigan, they do Vanguard and Charles
Okay.
and SCHD, which is Charles Schwab dividend. Yeah.
Okay.
And they do a checking account and a savings account. So
Right. Right. So yes, if you like Michigan's, then feel free to open there. But remember, only have one ABLE account in the country. Don't open multiple ABLE accounts.
yeah, and also it's tax free, right? You don't got to pay tax on it either, correct?
Right. Yes. Now technically this is not a retirement account, but retirement accounts technically they have multiple kinds, but either they grow tax deferred, or in the case of what are called Roth options, then it's basically tax free. You pay tax. Obviously, you've already been taxed on the money going in, but then all the growth comes out tax free. Whereas an ABLE account, you've already paid tax on that money going in, but the growth, yes, is not taxed. So, yes. Okay. Any questions on ABLE accounts at the moment?
Audio now unmuted. Hello, sorry to interrupt. This is Carlo. What else the ABLE what is it? ABLE account can benefit?
Basically, the main purpose of an ABLE account, they've been around for about 10 years. If you are receiving state benefits such as SSI, that is the main thing. Back in the old days, so to speak, a person could only have $2,000 of traceable money. And so literally back when I first lost my vision, I saw different communities, they would store it under their mattress or something of that nature. And they would have lots of money, but literally it was just under their mattress. This gives you the option to invest your money or even put it in a savings account or anything other than, say, stuffing it under your mattress. And until it gets up to $100,000, you still can receive your state benefits. So that's the main benefit of an ABLE account.
Okay.
And yeah. Another question?
This is Jacob.
Sure.
So what do you do after you meet $100,000? In all seriousness.
Well, your SSI is temporarily suspended. Okay. And now if you're just barely over that, you can easily spend some of that money and get below the 100,000. If you're significantly above, now remember, these these accounts, they're not trying to encourage people to have investment accounts and receive taxpayer benefits. They're wanting everybody eventually to get off things like SSI. But yes, basically, if you have enough money, then you would not have SSI anymore.
This is Liz.
Okay, Liz.
Can we get back to where you started so we can finish one flow of thought?
Can you tell
You've
me
jumped all
where
over and I'm
I
lost.
started?
Well, you started with the steps 1, 2, and 3 about getting rid of your debt and all that. And maybe we
Yes.
should stick to something,
Okay.
one
Okay,
string.
no problem. No problem. Basically on your step 1 was to partially fund an emergency fund. Okay. So, and you can decide, I would say 500 to 1,000, or if that's too much, try to have something there based on your life, your lifestyle, your conditions, etc. Then, if you have debt, especially high interest credit card debt, that stuff you need to knock out. There are 2 major ways to knock out debt, 2 philosophies, so to speak. One is called the snowball, one is called the avalanche. In the snowball, I'll explain this, that way you can pick whichever one you like the most. The snowball method is more for psychological pat on the back. That is, you line up your debts going, it doesn't matter the interest rates, from smallest to largest. You pay the minimum due on every single one except the smallest. That one you attack with gusto. You throw everything at it, including the kitchen sink. You pay that off extremely fast. Then, once you have that first debt paid off, then you have a little bit more money, and then you attack the second one, the third one, the fourth one, etc. That technique is called the snowball. The reason some people like the snowball is because even though you might be paying a small debt off first, it gives you a sense of accomplishment, and that way it's a psychological benefit. The other philosophy is called the avalanche. That appeals more to the math people, and that is, you line up your debts according to interest rates. The highest interest rate gets attacked first, basically the bill with the highest interest rate. So therefore, if you have, say, a personal loan and credit card debt, more than likely credit card is going to be a much higher interest rate. So that one you would attack first. Now remember, you're still paying the monthly minimum to all the others, but once you knock out that first one with the highest interest rate, then you attack the second, the third, the fourth, etc. That is step number 2. Step number 3 is to go back to your emergency fund and to fully fund it. That means, now, as one person mentioned earlier, they had heard 3 to 6 months. Different people will say different things. You can do 6 to 12 months if you want, 3 to 6 months. The main thing is it really comes down to how stable is your income. If you have a job, let's say, I would recommend I would recommend a minimum of 6 to 12 months, probably more 12 if your job is, say, not unionized and that kind of thing. If your income is extremely stable, such as you're getting an annuity payment or you're getting a settlement and that is fixed and guaranteed, then you obviously can maybe go down to 6 months. But how you figure up what is fully funded, that you would basically calculate how much do you literally spend on your bills in, say, 6 months or 12 months. And that, of course, is going to add up not only your monthly bills, but your annual bills, such as if you pay for home insurance by the year, that would be included. So that's basically step 3. Step 4 gets into retirement accounts. They generally recommend that you fund up to, well, really more, but they have a target. Most advisors recommend funding 15% of your income to your retirement account. Now, remember, if you've gotten to this stage, you have no more debts other than, say, if you're paying a mortgage. You have no more debts. You have a fully funded emergency fund. So in case any emergencies come up, you've got that covered. So they recommend 15% going into retirement accounts. And beyond that, then if you have a house or a mortgage still, you would pay that. And once you get through all of those steps, you definitely want to increase funding the retirement account even more. And in addition to retirement accounts, I'm kind of skipped ahead because it's on the topic. There are what are called non-retirement investment accounts, and that anyone can do. By the way, if you're not receiving state aid, such as SSI, and you do not have earned income, i.e., that is a job, you are allowed to do a non-retirement investment account, and there is no minimum, and you basically can put in as much as you want, and you can buy the same things that you would buy, let's say, in a retirement account, such as an IRA or a solo 401, etc. So did that answer that question? Okay.
This is Vincent.
Vincent?
Yes, I have a question. Can you tell us the difference between an advisor and a fiduciary?
Yes, basically a fiduciary is by law supposed to recommend the best things for you. An advisor, on the other hand, if they are not a fiduciary, they are not under that umbrella, under that law. Now, what I am is a little bit different. I'm an actual investor. An advisor or a financial planner, to get one of those, basically you have to pass a test. And without any money or really any experience, they are hired by a company and they start telling you what to do with your money. The problem is you're the one taking the risk. And so whether you gain or lose, they still get paid. Me, on the other hand, I am not an advisor. I am an investor. I make my income not from a company paying me that I've convinced you to buy their products, but I actually make money from investing myself. So that's basically the difference between an advisor, who is a non-fiduciary, a fiduciary advisor, and investor. And yeah, you will not see investors working for brokerage companies because basically they don't need to. But
Okay,
go
guys,
ahead.
we got about 15 minutes left. If there's anybody who has not had a chance to ask a question, I'm going to invite you right now to come up and ask your questions in like this last segment. Anybody who has not had a chance or has not spoken. And hearing crickets. Okay, Daryl, continue on with your.
Okay, let's.
Wait.
Was
Who's
there
that?
a question?
Yeah, I have a question.
Okay.
Can you
What's your
talk
name?
a bit about Roth IRA?
Rough IRA.
Yes.
What was the question about a Roth IRA?
Yeah, can you talk a little bit about it?
Sure. IRAs, both traditional and Roth, basically an IRA is an account. It stands for Individual Retirement Account. There is the biggest condition with either a traditional or a Roth is either you or your spouse, if you're married, must have earned income for the given year that you're making the contribution. Okay, that is a key factor. If you or your spouse, neither one of you are, say, working, or you're not married and you're not working, do not contribute to an IRA. That is not allowed. In that case, you would use a non-retirement account. But in a Roth or traditional, basically you put the money in. You say, well, what's the difference? A traditional IRA is pre-tax money. You put it in, it grows, it's tax deferred. When you start pulling out, that's when you pay tax. For a Roth IRA, and by the way, they have Roth 401s and Roth 457s, etc. But basically, the money is taxed. Let's call it the principal. The money going in is already taxed, but then as it grows, not only is it tax deferred, but then when you pull it out, it is also tax exempt. Okay, and that's basically the Roth option. IRAs, and now these are personal IRAs. There are other types of IRAs, which I can get to maybe later or another time. A traditional IRA or a Roth IRA currently has a limit of $7,000 if you're under age 50, and an extra $1,000 called a catch-up if you're 50 or older. And that's the contribution limit. Did you have a follow-up question to that?
Yeah, so did you say that if you're not married, you should not open one of those accounts?
If you are not married and you do not have earned income, so i.e. a job, if you have a job, you're good to go. Okay. If you do,
yeah,
okay. Yeah, did everybody understand the way I explain that? Sometimes I can explain things and makes everyone confused. But yes, either you must have earned income or your spouse, if you're married, must have earned income in order to contribute to an IRA. Those are called personal IRAs. There are other things if you are self-employed, such as SEP IRA, Simple IRA, etc. But short of anybody asking those questions, I won't get into that tonight.
So follow-up question for Cindy. So do you recommend them?
Do I recommend a Roth IRA? Is that the question?
Yes.
Oh, absolutely. Now, remember, IRAs are just empty boxes. What the real, what do you call it? Where the real test is what you put in those boxes. But yes, an IRA, just like a 401, that's basically an empty box. It doesn't mean anything. It's just how the IRS treats it. It's really what you put in to that box. And that's where maybe another time we would get into diversification, such as percentage of domestic equity, international equity, different kinds of bonds, preferred stock, and cash equivalents. So yes, it's what goes into the box that's the real key. But yes, I do recommend it. And you say, well, what is better than a Roth IRA or a Roth 401? Is there anything better? An HSA is actually even better than that. That stands for a health savings account. If you are employed and you have an HSA, I recommend fully funding that, because that is what the industry calls triple tax protection. It goes in without paying tax, it grows tax free, and if it comes out for medical bills or later, let's say once you're collecting Medicare, you can use it to pay premiums, and that comes out tax free. So it goes in tax free, it grows tax free, it comes out tax free if you use it as directed. So HSAs are even better. The problem with these things are they have a limit. Most retirement plans do have a limit. HSAs have a limit, personal IRAs have a limit, SEPs. Probably the best thing if you're self-employed is called a solo 401. That allows the maximum way to contribute to your retirement plan. Beyond that, or if you do not have earned income, usually the best, if you're not collecting state benefits, is what is called a non-retirement brokerage account. If you are collecting state benefits and want to continue collecting state benefits, then an ABLE account is probably the best way to go. Or if you have more assets than what an ABLE can hold, then you go over to what's called a special needs trust. I briefly touched on that earlier, and you can use both of those in conjunction with each other to achieve basically payments and lifestyle, etc. Okay. Any follow-up questions?
We got 4 minutes left, guys. Anybody's got
This is Sandhya.
one more question?
Okay.
Sandhya.
Okay, so we're not investors like you are. So how can we sort of educate ourselves, or you kind of got us started tonight? And what would you recommend? What are some resources that you'd recommend? Like, I don't know, there are certain blogs or, shows or podcasts, or what would you recommend?
Unfortunately, yeah, I could say reading on the web is good. Definitely reading is beneficial. The problem is, just like on the web, 90% of what is out there can be working against you, and it's self-serving someone else. Definitely, though, as you read and as you gain experience, that definitely helps, because as you gain experience, you can start to separate what is good from, something like get rich quick schemes. And there are many of those. Unfortunately, there are far more things that work against you, whether it be get rich quick schemes or methods that basically recommend timing the market, using a lot of option puts, option calls, which I didn't have time for tonight, but there's a lot of things like that. If I'm allowed to say that I basically have a Q&A on another forum. May I mention that or not?
Yeah, go ahead.
Okay. Over on ACB, the first, third, and fifth Saturdays of the month, I have a Q&A basically, and if anybody fails to ask questions, then I actually start teaching material. But other than that, it's a Q&A, and you can feel free to drop in that. That's ACB. And I think if you send a email to community@acb.org and tell them to sign up for the daily emails, if any of you guys are not signed up, they send a daily email. Well, anyway, the first, third, and fifth Saturdays, I basically have an hour-long Q&A investing. So I'm glad to take any questions that way. If iBug decides to have me back in this format, I can easily come back and answer more questions, and we can get into things that were not addressed tonight, such as mutual funds, the difference between managed and index. We can get into exchange traded funds or ETFs. We can get into diversification, allocation, tax diversification, etc.
You're definitely inside my head, because I was going to say we're going to need a part 2 of this. Don't know when. I'll discuss that with Michael and Sandy. Well, Michael calling for the floor. Go ahead, Michael.
Yeah, I was actually going to jump in here and just mention that. Yeah, Daryl's been a wealth of information tonight, and really appreciate him being here. And definitely, we will be bringing him back for more in depth on some of the he just barely brushed the surface on a lot of things. So we definitely want to have him back for that. One thing I failed to mention, I should have jumped in at the very beginning, and let me just pull this up. All right, so the information or services provided tonight is for informational purposes only and not intended to be personal financial advice. There's an inherent risk involved with financial decisions, and iBug will not be held liable for your personal decisions. I had to put that disclaimer there and make sure it got on the recording.
Yeah, I'm sure Sandy would have beat you up if you didn't.
Daryl, this is Shrey.
Yes.
Just out of curiosity, we're all screen reader users. Are these tools that you're using, are they fully accessible?
Yes, I use a screen reader myself, and I've been using screen readers long before I became a professional investor.
Can you mention the kind of tools that you use, or is that proprietary to what you're doing?
JAWS.
Okay. What about on the Apple side?
On the Apple side? You mean the investing?
Like the voiceover, is it the tools that we use, like
on
mostly
Apple.
voiceover.
Okay. No, just for my phone. I have helped people. I use it a little bit. I mainly use my computer because I'm an old guy, but I have helped people set up their say, for instance, their Fidelity app using just the Apple voiceover program. And usually it works better in classic mode, but I have known people that use just regular mode. But if regular mode gives you problems, switch over to classic if you want Fidelity. Now, I mentioned Fidelity because their app on Apple rates higher than, say, Vanguard. But they're, if you're, say, with a different brokerage company and you like their app, then yeah, feel free to use whatever works good for you. But for me personally, I just use a regular screen reader. It's JAWS now. Before JAWS, it was GW Micro, Window Eyes, and those are the screen readers I've used for 30 years.
Well, Darryl, go ahead. So was Jacob? It's going to be like the last question. Go ahead.
I know it's about the software. Have you used Charles Schwab bank at all or no?
I have not, but over on ACB, I generally have mentioned them when I recommend Vanguard, Fidelity, and Charles Schwab. If you are with Charles Schwab and like Charles Schwab, then I have no problem staying there. The only negative thing that I've heard about Charles Schwab is that their sweep accounts, that's the money that, basically gets swept into the money market, they were paying a very low yield, and they kind of forced people to be in that sweep account. Vanguard and Fidelity don't have that problem. That is the only thing that I have heard that I remember that was negative against Schwab. Other than that, just like Fidelity and Vanguard, they offer stocks commission free, ETFs commission free, etc. So
Yeah, I
if
think
you are
Charles,
go ahead.
I was just about to say, from my curiosity from making calls, Charles Schwab only interested if you got like big dollars to put into them, or they'll hang up on you.
Really? As far as customer service goes, what I generally recommend back in the day, Vanguard had, out of those three, they had the best product and they had great customer service. The problem was they became so good at the product, their customer service got swamped. What I recommend now, let's say if nobody has an account, is opening the account at Fidelity, but actually buying or investing using the Vanguard ETFs. Oh, here's a good question. Let's say if I wanted to invest in almost 10,000 companies, how many dollars would I need? Just take a guess.
10,000?
$1.
No.
Okay.
No
Now,
penny stocks?
no. These are basically 10,000 companies, all the names that whether it be Google, Microsoft, etc., all the way down to international companies, literally almost $10,000, 10,000 companies. That is basically the S&P Wilshire. I'm going to get my tongue working here, but that's the global ETF. Basically, my point is ETFs, especially when they are allowing you to trade commission free, you say, well, what's the minimum for an ETF? And by the way, don't get ETF confused with EFT. In my last group, one lady thought that I was standing for EFT. ETF is an exchange traded fund. That is basically a mutual fund, but it trades on an exchange, such as what you can do with individual stocks. $1 is the minimum. So literally for $1 minimum, you could diversify among almost 10,000 companies worldwide.
All right, guys. Daryl?
Okay. Yeah, we're going to have to end this.
Yeah. I just wanted to thank you so much for volunteering your time and your knowledge. We have obviously learned a lot, and now we know how much we need to learn. That's always a good thing about learning, right? So, and thanks to everybody that participated. Thank you, George. And you want to tell them the topic for next, It's iBugs Live, George?
Next month, we're going to talk about independently grocery shopping. Not just
Woohoo!
online, even in person.
All
I'm going to give you
right.
some tips on how you can recognize stuff. So be back here on May is that 23rd? Yeah, it got to be May 23rd.
All
Can't be May
right.
30th. That's after Memorial Day. I don't know. We figured it out.
Yeah, that's right. Well, very good. Thank you guys. And again, we appreciate your time. And Daryl, we'll see you tomorrow night on virtual night at the movies. So
Yeah,
I got to do those
yeah.
songs.
I thank
I
you too,
know.
Daryl,
So
and we are going to have you back. I
Okay.
think
All
that's the
right.
Be glad
safe
Thank
to.
you, everybody. We are saying goodnight, ending the
Thank
recording in
you.
5,
Hold the audio
4,
balance.
Good night.
Participants left Baron
Thank
27.
you.
Baron. That has left the meeting. Shay has left the meeting. Alt F4. Leave.